Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Mark from Solo Games. Today, we're going to talk about new players. So, as I promised, I'm going to do some content for newer players who are just starting the game. So, kind of get you started, understanding what are the options out there, what are some of the best, choices. I'll probably make a couple videos. So, if this one isn't really for you, the next couple probably could help you. I'm hoping if you're new to the game, just helping you like maybe skip some of the mistakes or make sure I point you towards the right products that I've landed on after pretty much trying, experimenting with a lot of different things. So let's get started. Today we're going to focus on just in general getting started in Magic. So if you're super new, you've never played a single game before, how do you actually get started in this game? Pretty straightforward. First of all, if you're new, welcome to the game. You're going to have a lot of fun. I think Magic is actually a really amazing game. It has been here for 30 years. And as you can imagine, for a game to have lasted this long, there must be something like, that attributes to its longevity. So why are Magic so amazing? Well, the first thing I think is great about Magic is that there are so many ways to play the game, right? Whether you're playing Standard, which is the format of Magic where only the current couple sets matter, and so like that's what people are playing, or maybe if you're playing like some of the other constructed sets like Pioneer or constructed themes, Pioneer, Modern, etc. There are a lot of ways to get into Magic that isn't too expensive. But if you want to have the more expensive options or the more what we call higher level, power level options, you have those options as well. So that's kind of cool. And the idea is that the card pool of Magic can be limited to a small set like Standard, which is like usually a rotational about 2 years worth of Magic products that's available in those, versus Pioneer and Modern are more like larger sets where you have more cards to choose from. So again, that's why the power level is higher. And then of course, the more casual formats, like for example, Commander is very popular in Magic. Commander is basically this idea that you're playing what we call singleton. A singleton is a deck of one of each card. So you can't have multiple copies of a card. In Magic, the rule in general for a deck is you can only have up to 4 copies of every card. There are some exceptions to those, but honestly, as a new player, don't worry about it too much. You're just, in general, thinking about 4 copies of every card, except the basic lands that you need. You can have infinite copy of those. A singleton format is where instead of having 4, you're limited to only having 1 copy of each card. Now, this usually helps because it makes the decks less consistent, so it's a little bit more casual, right? So you're not having decks or facing other people's decks where they're always playing the same card, the same combos, that kind of things. It's a little bit more fun, chaotic. That's what it is. So with Commander, deck sizes are 100 or 99 plus 1 Commander card. And then, of course, you have a full deck of singletons, 99 different cards in there. Again, not excluding the lands, but everything else is singleton. Other formats you can play are Cube. I wouldn't recommend a new player try to go out there to build a cube, but you can definitely join. There's probably a lot of people hosting cubes at your local LGS that you can join and take part of. Other formats like limited, so you can do draft or sealed for the current set. Basically, this is another way to play the game with very limited information. It's actually kind of fun because it's kind of everyone's playing on the same power level. It's very, very hard to build a very strong deck, but at the same time, it's kind of fun because every game is going to be very different because you have to pick the cards for those games separately. Cube is similar, but basically you are somebody has created this draft experience for you. Pauper is another format where basically you're playing with common only cards, so you're really limiting yourself, but also it's a cheaper format for a lot of players to get into. If you want to have a Pauper deck, it's usually much, much, much cheaper than if you were to go for a Pioneer or a Modern deck especially. Also, just the ways of playing is very different. Generally, when we play Magic, we think of one-on-one, right? But for example, in Commander, it's a pot of 4. So it's a free-for-all for 4 players. You can play 2v2, like Two-Headed Giants, other formats like that. Or there's also other types of alliance sets, like Battle Bond or Conspiracy. They probably will have newer sets in the future that kind of do these things as well. There's also really fun, people versus boss type of thing. So there's Arch Enemy, Plane Chase. These are older sets, but I'm sure in the future, Wizards will release products like this where you can kind of do 3v1 type of thing. It's really fun. Again, things you can do for that. There's lots of cards to choose from too, right? So because of 30 years of Magic history, there's a large card pool. I think it's currently over 15,000 cards, different cards that you can choose from. So that's really great. The other part is also the game pieces are basically relatively cheap if you factor in a resale. So what I mean by this is like if you play, especially like something like limited, you can actually get a limited deck, or you could play like, you know, at a local LGS for Friday Night Magic, not for too expensive, like maybe $10 for the draft or 15. And then if you pull anything good, you can usually sell that and maybe make all the money back for the draft. So it's not too bad as far as cost wise if you play those formats. Now, if you're playing more of the constructed formats where you have to buy certain cards to build your decks, that gets a little bit more pricey. But that's, again, what I would recommend is playing a lot of limited when you first start. So what do you actually need to play Magic, right? Realistically, you don't really need anything. If you, the best way to do it is if you come show up to any LGS for a pre-release event, they'll have everything you need. Or if you play with your friends, maybe you can go to somebody who's hosting a draft or sealed event at their house. I guess you're just bringing drinks and food. You know, be friendly. But otherwise, you know, they'll have all the stuff you need. There's some other basic things, you know, that I can show you. So let me show you what those are. Now, if you really want to get a couple basic equipments for playing, here's what I would recommend. This is what I carry to every single event with my friends, etc. So let's kind of go over that, right? So the first thing you want to do is make sure you have some sort of play mat. Highly recommend buying some sort of play mat and case. So I have the Pyramid play mat and case that goes in here like this. Or if you want to go a little bit simpler, just get the Ultra Pro. There's a case like this. With your playmat, you can roll up inside there. So those are really, really helpful. Playmats is great because you don't really want to put your cards on a wooden table or anything like that. You do want to make sure it's on something that's nice and, you know, you can slide the cards around without damaging them. And it's just easier to pick it up and all that stuff. So buy a playmat, invest in that. The second thing I would always recommend is buying a deck box or two. A lot of people say, like, why don't you just buy cheaper deck boxes to begin with? My recommendation is deck boxes, I'm going to use them forever, essentially. So buy something that's a little bit more expensive and something that you're going to kind of keep forever, right? Something I highly recommend is the Boulder. They're not really even that expensive. These deck boxes are going to run you about $10 and $15 each. This smaller one's going to be about $10, $12. This one might be at $15. I recommend if you're playing just standard in the beginning, I would get 2 of these. Question mark, maybe just 1. This I use all the time because whenever I build my decks and I need to carry the cards from one table to another, I always have a deck box like this for my 40 cards, plus my sideboard token, whatever. They would all go in here. This one is my personal land station. I always bring it with me. Basically what this allows me to do is, as I'm building decks, I have lands already kind of pre-sleeved, and of course like empty sleeves in the back. So then what I can do is, if I'm building a deck, I just go through here, I get the lands already pre-sleeved, and I sleeve up my cards from the draft or sealed event. So very helpful to have this. I go for the 100, so this is called a Boulder 100. Basically it fits a little bit more than 100 cards sleeved, and the reason you do that is because especially with the land stations, you're going to need a little bit more lands. If you're going to go for one of these things, I would recommend just about 10 lands of each type, sleeved, plus maybe about probably 30, 40 sleeves is good enough for this set here. I always bring this small little case here. What I do with this is I just carry some tokens. In this case, I'm using these like what they call like dual face cards as my kind of like one-time use tokens. So I just use these, I write on them, I draw a token, and then I throw the card away after I'm done. They're great because they do have a magic back and they just feel kind of nice, which then, you know, let me introduce my other thing. I use a Sharpie. You can use the bold ones or the thin one. It really doesn't matter. Whatever you feel is kind of like, you know, easy to write on. That's where you want to go. The other kind of must-have is a dice set. I go for a dice bag. This is like some dice bag I think I got from a mouse. But like I would have a big spin down dice like this. So these are a little bit bigger than like the other ones that you get in the pre-release packs. These are great because they're really good for marking your life total, and they're spin down. So when you spin them in like a circular fashion, they just kind of sequentially go down in life. So it's easier to track your life total using one of these. I would also carry kind of like D6s like this. These are good for counting, like for example, number of tokens, or if you have +1/+1 counters, these are great ways to track that on your creatures. And then lastly, basically, I think in general, like you want to carry some extra sleeves. So these right here are just extra sleeves I always bring with me. In case I find some really rare card in a pack, that kind of things. Though these are going to be good for making sure that those cards are well protected. Yeah. Oh, I guess the thing that we forgot about. So this outer shell here is a carrying case. I use the quiver, but really it doesn't matter. Honestly, with most of the things I'm recommending here, like with a nice little drawstring for your dice bag, this and all these and even the pen can fit in the backpack. You really don't need the outer carrying case if you don't want to. It's not a necessary thing for you to bring. Yeah, and as far as like sleeves go, my go-to sleeves are always going to be Dragon Shield. I think they're just beautiful feeling sleeves. I go for the matte, and the mattes shuffle better than if you go for the glossy Dragon Shield. And then perfect fit if you're carrying something really expensive. But otherwise, penny sleeves are great too, just for anything that's comes out of pack. You want to store it away and don't really want to put it raw. Any of the bulk cards, I just kind of chuck them right here. So the nice thing about having a storage case like this, they have a lot of space. Plus, they give you dividers you can use in here to kind of separate your cards. So that's pretty much what I would do. Again, this is not necessary, but this is if you want to spend a little bit more money, kind of get your setup going, this is what I would recommend. Okay, so moving forward, what are some of the recommended game types? Well, what I always recommend for new players is really to show up to a store and attend a sealed event. Usually these will happen during pre-release weekend. So for example, Brothers War is coming out soon. We will have pre-release, I think it's November 18th or something. I forget whichever Friday. But basically on that whole weekend, a lot of stores will run events all weekend. Find a day that you want to go, bring a friend or have a friend like take you. But also just, there's going to be so many people at these events usually where everyone's pretty friendly. Sealed is also nicer because what you do is you get 6 draft packs of a booster, again, within what we call pre-release kit. The pre-release kit will come up with a dice, your packs, a promo card, just other things that kind of can help you build your deck and play. There'll be a ton of players, so it's a great place for you to ask questions. I've never been to a pre-release event where no one's willing to help. I've sat with a lot of new players all the time, and I can help them where I can. I'm not the best deck builder, but I will try to help them at least get the basics of like how many lands you need, how many cards you put in there, what kind of things, color, those kind of things, to be part of your deck. Again, just go with a friend is probably the best way to a sealed event, so it's less pressure. Drafting is a little bit advanced if you have never played Magic. Now, if it's a couple times, you kind of have an idea of all the color identities, you have an idea of like what colors you're doing, or if you played a set for a couple times where you have a good feeling for what the set's doing, drafting is actually a lot of fun. In my opinion, if you could draft versus play sealed, I would always prefer draft, but sometimes sealed is the better option, especially if you're new, or the only option for pre-release events. Yeah. Now, what are some other things you can do? The starter decks or dual decks, they used to be called, or nowadays I think we have a Jumpstart. They're all great ways for you to get a basic hang of the game without the difficulty or having to put a lot of thought into building decks. So, for example, some of the dual decks that they have in the past are, you can buy those like what they call starter decks, and they usually come with 2 decks and you can kind of play each other with those. Those are great. Stores used to be back in, I think, 2015, 2016-ish era. They used to have decks that are just free. So if you show up with a friend and you're teaching them Magic, they can just give you a deck that you can play, show the game to your friend for free. But nowadays, what we have is Jumpstart. So Jumpstart, I think, is a great option that you can pretty much find at any store to learn how to play the game. What those packs look like is these packs of about 20 cards each. This is, again, the open pack, but before this is in the booster wrapping and all that stuff. But basically, the way Jumpstart works is you pick any 2 decks. In this case, here, let me pick something different, like this. Right, you pick 2, and you basically open them. You don't know what you get. You take 2 of them, you mix them all together because there's lands already in here, and you make a 40-card deck, and it kind of just works. Recommendation on Jumpstart though is, in general, don't buy the Jumpstart like of each set. So, for example, they might have Jumpstart Dominaria United or Jumpstart Brothers War. My recommendation is stay away from those products unless they're heavily discounted, meaning maybe I would not pay more than $4 per pack of those. Otherwise, the Jumpstart 2022, Jumpstart 2020, I think, are also great options. If they have 2020, that's great. 2022 probably also a great product. We haven't seen it yet, but I suspect it should be okay. These are great ways to get started with the game. There's no pressure to build a deck. By and large, the cards are very understandable, so it's easy to kind of figure that out. Yeah. The other thing I really recommend is join friends. So if you have friends who are pretty serious about Magic, join them at a home draft. So a lot of times, like my friends will host drafts at home. We go there, we show up, and then we just play draft. Great environment, very casual, no timers and clocks and whatever. And really is just for friends to kind of get an understanding of the game, especially if you show up, tell them you're new. They're going to figure that out and kind of work with you. Some of the guys who are pretty fast at building decks are going to finish their decks and then go help you with yours. So that's another good way to learn the game. But if you have no friends to draft with, online is another option. So Wizards does have the Magic Arena, online version of the game. A beautiful looking game, really. I mean, the animation, the graphics are really good. My only issue is that it's not physical cards, but you're kind of, if you wish to go with a paying route, you are paying real money for the game. So it's a little tricky. Not a hard recommendation. Maybe a great way to learn the game, but my recommendation for everybody who's starting out, play in paper. Paper is I think it's a lot more fun just to have like a feel for the cards and be in person with people. Even if you can't be in person, I still recommend maybe if you have decks, play on webcam, right? Through Spell Table and other apps like that can really help you do the digital experience of, playing with people across the internet, but without having to do the actual digital cards. I think one of the problems I hate about Arena is it's a little bit too official. Like, there are little tricks that you don't understand when you first start, about assigning damage, about like holding priority, about like just there's a shot clock element. You have to, if you take too long to think, you skip your turn. These are all things I think are just not very helpful for newer players. I would rather play in paper, where a lot of times when I sit down with newer players, I just let them take their turn back if they make a mistake, or I'll point them out, hey, you should probably play this card this way. This is usually a good way to teach people. It's not about like winning the game or anything like that. I want to win the game fairly. I don't want to just beat up somebody who doesn't even understand how the game works, right? So anyways, make sure that learning opportunity is really, really great, especially so this video right here, this is for the veterans. When you have new players, really kind of take them in, show them around, let them figure things out a little bit, give them a little more time, help them with turns. Now, don't do it at the detriment of your game, I would say, because sometimes that makes it not fun for you. But at the same time, like make sure it's a fair match. And the other thing is also just, if you're a new player, don't worry about it too much. Mistakes are bound to happen. I make mistakes all the time, and I'm by far not the best player at all or anything like that, but I have been playing for a while. Mistakes will happen. It's part of the game. You'll see pros on TV at grand finals, whatever, making mistakes. It's just how it is. This is the way the game is. It's fine. It's totally okay to make mistakes. So don't worry too much about having the perfect turns or playing it perfectly. A lot of it is figuring it out, because Magic rules are simple on the face, but they're actually pretty complicated as you get pretty deep into things like the stack, different types of like orders, the different phases, that kind of stuff. So again, nothing to even worry about right now. Just enjoy the game. The pros will tell you or ask you, hey, what do you want to do? There's different phases. You'll get used to it when you get there. Okay, so once you feel a little bit more comfortable, like I said before, with like a sealed deck, you kind of have an understanding of Magic, I highly, highly, highly recommend drafting. Drafting is a great way to learn the game from a perspective of a limited event, where you kind of can see all the cards, understand how cards and other cards interact with each other, try to build the best decks. There's also the meta game of drafting, where basically drafting is you open a pack of 15 cards, draft packs, and then you pick a card and you pass the card to the left or right, it kind of rotates. But you do this with 3 packs, so you're going to get about 45 cards towards the end of the draft. You're going to get exactly 45 cards, right? Because you keep passing until the pack is done. But the beautiful thing about pack drafting is that you can only pick one card. So let's say the pack has 2 cards or 3 cards that are really good. You can only pick one of them. The other part that's really great is there's the meta game of understanding what your players on your left and right are doing. As you pass the packs around, you can start seeing maybe what cards are missing, what theme element people are picking, and then you could pick against them. Because one of the greatest things about Magic is that there is no best color or best like strategy. In fact, for example, like what happens in draft a lot of times is if there's a best color or best strategy, then everybody starts picking towards that best strategy, and then you can actually get really good cards of a secondary or tertiary strategy because no one's picking those cards, and have them fight over that primary. And this is the whole mindset behind drafting, and it's actually kind of interesting. Yeah. So again, drafting is a little bit more advanced, but once you get a little more comfortable with Magic, I do highly recommend it. I think it's probably the best way to play. And in fact, this is the way that Wizards design their game. When they build the game and when they test, they heavily test how the game will draft. So each set as they release, they figure out how it will draft, and that's a big part of the game. Lastly, when you want to get into what we call constructed is where instead of having like randomized card in a sealed or draft, you're doing more of a deck that's more consistent. There are some off-the-shelf decks out there. Like you can probably buy standard decks or pioneer decks. Just especially with standard, make sure you check to make sure that's the standard deck of this year. Wizard doesn't always release products for that year or for that current rotation, so you have to be a little bit careful. You might be buying decks that are not legal for standard. For example, if you buy the 2020 standard deck today, it will not be legal because we just had rotation. There's that. Pioneer decks are great too because they're a good way to start in a more of an eternal format that's called Pioneer, so it has a bunch of sets already in there. Again, the cards probably won't expire, but the deck strategies might change as new cards become available into that format. So be aware of that. But most of these decks out of the box are very playable, and they're not very expensive. I think usually they run about $40 to $60 each. Retail, I haven't bought any of these, so I don't remember, but I think that's the price usually what I see MSRP. And lastly, highly recommend buying an off-the-shelf Commander deck. Lots of players, pretty much every player of Magic will play Commander. It's the most common, most popular format. Most card stores will host a Commander night or Commander Day, whatever, every week. So you can show up with your deck and then find a pod of 4 people and then just start playing Commander. It's a great format. Really helps you to learn the game, see a bunch of different cards, very different power levels, etc. And a lot of the Commander decks off the shelf nowadays are strong enough to go toe-to-toe with other Commander decks that are pre-constructed. So I would just buy one of those decks and have a lot of fun. Commander is also a lot more casual, less competitive, so it allows you to make more mistakes, and it's more about like socializing and maybe sometimes like politics instead of just like straight up my monsters, my creatures will kill your creatures and kill you, etc. That's less about Commander, what Commander is about. So there's a lot more fun. And the best part about Commander is most of those decks are what I call like they have a long longevity, right, shelf life, because Commander is a format that doesn't really change that much. Of course, there will be staples or your new like must-haves for Commander, but it's not something that you must have at that moment. So a lot of times for Commander, essentially if you buy a deck, it will last you a good amount of time. So highly recommend those as well. Anyways, this video is already getting a little too long for a new player guide. But anyways, I hope that's helpful. Leave some comments for me about how you felt about this video, what other type of tips, tricks, things you would like to look forward to, or questions. I read all of them, so I would love to help all the new players who are joining this game. Anyways, thank you. It's Mark from Solar Games. I'm signing out, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.